Hello, right, let's episode 2. This one, I've put things back to the way they were at the start of the kind of previous recording. So in other words, what I've got, let me just show you the HTML. What I've got is my wrapper class around things, the banner, the nav, main, and a footer. In other words, where am I? In other words, I've kind of got these elements: wrapper, banner, menu, which is nav, the main content, which contain these things, and footer. So I'm now going to implement this not using float as I did in the previous screencast, but using flex. Certain things can remain the same, so I've not deleted everything and starting from scratch, so I've left these photo box things exactly as they were before. So in other words, that's what you're looking at here. But rather than making this menu float to this side, we're going to use flex instead. And what flex does, and there's a great guide here on what it does in CSS tricks, a complete guide to Flexbox. And effectively what flex does is enable you to put various elements side by side. This previously we used to accomplish with floats, but floats, they're a bit difficult to get them all to be the same height if there's different amounts of content, whereas flex does precisely that. It's got lots of properties to enable you to change the ordering of things, to change whether it's in a column or it's in a row, to change whether they wrap underneath each other, whether they grow or shrink or justify content. In short, it's a great way to be able to do things. So that's what I'm going to try and attempt to do. Now the menu goes by the side of this main content. So my first thought was, oh well, I'll use flex, because what you do is you make the parent of something flex. I'll make this in some way flex, so this goes to the left of this, and they're side by side. But I thought, actually, if I make the entire thing flex, it might actually be more flexible, and maybe both of us learn some things on the way, because I've not done it before. I'm sort of flying by the seat of my pants here slightly. So let's do that. The way flex works is you give a flex definition to a wrapper, and then all of the immediate children become flex children. In effect, they go side by side. If we're working in rows or if we're working in columns, they go underneath each other. So the flex immediate children, if I make wrapper the flex parent, would be header, nav, main, and footer. I say the immediate children, in other words, H1 isn't an immediate child and the UL isn't an immediate child because they're inside these. The immediate child is this first level of indent. So let's do that first of all. So on wrapper, I'm going to say display flex, and it's as simple as that. So let's do that, save it, and let's see what happens. Whoops, so they all go side by side, because that's what the default is that they'll be in a row. Okay, so that's what they are, in a row. Now, well, that looks nice, but it's not what I wanted, because I want this header with the class of banner to be all the way across the top. So let's go in and say header banner. I want it to be, and I can never quite remember, it's something, there's a shorthand, and it's something like flex 1, and then how much width you want, and I can't remember what the 1 is, and that's very, I was going to say crappy, but you wouldn't want me to say that on video, would you? It's something to do with whether they shrink or whether they grow. I'll tell you what, I'll give you flex. Here we go. Flex is the shorthand for flex grow and flex shrink. Okay, so I'll leave you to read about that. So let's see if I've succeeded with that particular definition. So I want that to go all the way across the top. Well, it didn't do. It sort of just moved things along a bit. So why is that? Well, there's another property to do with whether something wraps or not. Where is it? Oh, let me just search on this page for wrap. There we go. So flex flow is again a kind of a bit of a compound property. You can say whether you want it to be in a row or a column and whether you want it to wrap or not. So that's what I'm going to use, because at the moment I've not told it to wrap, and so what it's going to do, if I add more columns, they'll just try and fit them all in on the screen there. Whereas if I allow one to wrap underneath, that would be better. And as I remember, let me just have a look. That's a property of the parent. Okay, so go back to my wrapper and say flex flow. I said flex float. Flex flow is row, and I want it to wrap. So does that work? Yes, it does. Okay, so the other things flow underneath it. So that's 100%, and everything else kind of matches underneath. But I now need to say what widths these are relative to each other. Because for some reason that's not now next to that as it was before, and frankly I don't know why. Perhaps it's something to do with the width that this might naturally occupy. So let's do a definition about that. The banner is 100%. Let's say what we want the nav to be and what we want main to be. So this is a child property, flex. And I think what this first number is kind of like a weighting. So I'm going to say 1 auto, so it's got a weighting of 1 with an auto width. I think that's what's happening, but I need to read the documentation a bit better, frankly. And in main, I'm going to say flex, and I want it to have a larger weighting. So I'm just going to do that and see how I get on, see what happens with that. Okay, now that seemed to actually do something, didn't it? This here is now by the side of that, and it's bigger than that. Let's play around with that weighting. What I'm calling a weighting, it's the ability for it to grow, I believe. Let's make it slightly smaller and see what happens. Okay, so it's a slightly smaller proportion. I'll put it back to where it was. But notice the footer is now over here, because what we've told it is that the banner is 100% wide, but everything else just kind of fits in as it can, really. So where we've said header and banner is flex 1 and 100%, let's add to that and say what's it called, footer is also 100%. In the process, look, it'll change the border, but I'm not fussed about that. So now we've got that's 100% and that's 100%, but this is whatever it is, we haven't specified, but this we've given a kind of number of 8 there. I'm just going to play with that and see what happens if I increase it still further. It gets kind of larger in proportion to this. And I guess that all then kind of works, does it, if I resize things? Yes, it does. Okay, so then I'd do as I did before and take off borders around things to make things fit as they did before. There's one other thing about flex, which is that you can specify the order of things. So at the moment that's 1, 2, 3, 4, because that's the order in which they appear in the HTML. Yeah, header's 1, the nav is 2, main is 3, and the footer is 4. But I've got a feeling I can change the ordering of things. So now what is it? Is it flex order, or I think it is flex order? No, I can't remember, so I'm going to look it up, and it's something like order. Oh, it's just the word order. So let me go back. It's not flex order, it's just the word order. So let's imagine that on my demo here, I want it, instead of being 1, 2, 3, 4, I want it to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in other words, this goes after that. So the order won't be 2 as it is at the moment, it will be 3. And on main, the order won't be 3 as it is at the moment, it will be 2. I hope this works. It does work. except that I didn't specify the order of that. I'll probably need to specify the order of everything, in which case it's probably easier for me to do it separately, because then I can play around with them all separately. So I'm going to repeat them. So nav, this is dangerous to do, by the way, and I'm going to do it on one line, which is even more dangerous. So nav, and it's dangerous to do because you end up with repetition in your code and you forget there's a definition later on. That's why it's a bad thing to do. So I'm going to make that 2, and then I'm going to make the, what was it, the wrapper banner order as it is at the moment of 1, and then I'm going to change footer to be order 4. So I hope that will not alter things the way it has at the moment. Put them back the way I wanted. In other words, I've got that's 1, that's now 2, that's 3, that's 4. So in other words, I've just switched the menu to a different side. Yeah. So effectively all I did was change these numbers from 2 to 3. Okay, so effectively I've achieved exactly the same layout as I had with float, with maybe a marginal difference that this gives me a bit of flexibility because I can change the ordering in which things go. Right, there we go. Hope that was helpful. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.